Ma'am, your next witness.
Your Honor, our next witness is Joel Mandel.
Yeah. Again, Ms. Bredehoft. Thank you.
Your Honor, our next witness is Joel Mandel. He's also by deposition designation.
Okay.
And we start the questioning.
All right, thank you.
Can you please state your name and business address?
It's Joel Mandel. That's Mandel. It's 8383 Wilshire Boulevard.
Now, Mr. Mandel, you are here under subpoena. Is that correct? Testifying under subpoena?
Correct.
Okay. Could you please describe a little bit about your educational background and work experience?
I graduated from Brown University in 1980. I graduated from the University of California Berkeley School of Law in 1983. I went to work for a law firm in Century City from 83 to 87 called Wyman, Bouts, Rothman, Keekel, and Silver. And I left in March of 87 to form this company with my brother.
Could you please describe a little bit about your experience in the field of the business management, the types of clients represented, your reputation in Hollywood, business field?
I'll cut to where we are today. You can ask me different questions. I mean, we're a full, what I would describe as a full service business management firm, which means that we provide a wide array of financial, administrative, advisory kinds of services. And we pay bills and we do tax returns, and we assist people with purchases of cars and boats and art and planes, and we help people with outside professionals on estate planning matters, and we work with brokers on house purchases and with contractors on renovations. And so it's a wide range of financial, primarily financial services, but financial and personal services that we provide to our clients.
And what types of clients are those?
The business, our business is primarily entertainment. So I don't have a percentage. My guess is it's probably something like 80%. But that means people that work in the entertainment business, broadly speaking.
How long have you been a business manager in LA?
Since 1987.
When did you first meet Mr. Depp?
In, I believe, 1999.
So if you could take us to make this run a little more smoothly, start with what you provided in the earlier time, and if it changed over time, just kind of take me through if that's possible.
Let me do my best job. I would describe things initially as being the way I described our services generally. I mean, the broad range of things that we do for all of our folks, we did for Mr. Depp. What changed was that reasonably early on, so within the first few years, his life and career exploded in size. And so, as I said, our relationship started in 99. I think he did the first Pirates film in 2003. And so, it had already he was on a very successful trajectory. The success of the Pirates films obviously catapulted him to an entirely different level of success. And that was a career thing. It was also a financial thing. And so there was money made from the Pirates movies, and all of a sudden what he was going to now make moving forward was going to be significantly greater. His life changed. And so what did that translate? That translated into a variety of things. And I don't want to mix dates. It's a long stretch of time. But that meant a bigger life. It meant more employees. It meant buying additional real property. It meant buying additional personal property. It meant a bigger life and more expensive life.
Can you please describe for me the day-to-day logistics of communicating with Mr. Depp relating to your services?
Sure. So I'll explain this. But early on, Mr. Depp had made it clear that, just as my initial introduction to him had been through his sister, that his sister was acting in a, what I would call a gatekeeper-like role, and that she was going to play an instrumental part of his life in interfacing with people like me, like his agents, like his lawyers. And so there was interface on a constant basis with Christie in the role that he sort of placed her in. The conversations and communications were constant and daily. With Mr. Depp, they were when they needed to be. And so we talked often, we met often, but not with the same kinds of frequency, the daily kinds of frequency that I communicated with Christie.
Please describe the challenges presented in serving as the business manager for Mr. Depp.
Look, they changed over time. And so the challenges early on were the exciting challenges of somebody whose life and career were getting, very big very quickly. And that's a professional challenge, but it's a lovely, wonderful professional challenge. That means someone's traveling a lot. They're, again, income and expense grown dramatically. There's more staff, there are more real properties, there's more. It exponentially grows the size of the job. But that's what I do for a living. So that's all changes and challenges, but good changes and good challenges. My sense of the challenge of this representation and my description of the challenge would change probably sometime around 2010. I say that because it was the time after he had shot the film Run Diaries, and he had come back from that picture, and what had always been slightly difficulty in arranging meetings became more difficulty. And what I had always experienced as someone who liked to enjoy his wine at the end of the day became consumption that seemed excessive. And the ability to coordinate and find times when he would meet became more difficult. And it became clear over time that there were issues with alcohol and drugs. And that translated into more erratic behavior, more stressful behavior, more times when it was difficult to engage in the kinds of conversations I needed to do my job. And so it became more of a challenge for a variety of those reasons after 2010. And quite frankly, the other thing that happened, and this is in 13, 14, his meteoric sort of career rise had started to, there were some pictures that were not well received. And for anybody in the business, whether you're an actor, director, you're frequently judged by your last picture, and there were a number of pictures in a row that were not successful. And so there was a combination of events, what felt like professional pressures, what felt like some professional dissatisfactions, what I sensed was likely strains in his relationship with Amber, the use of alcohol and drugs, made my job more challenging.
You indicated that you were having more difficulty arranging meetings. What, if any, role did increased use of alcohol or drugs have on your ability to be able to arrange and engage in meetings with Mr. Depp?
There were stretches of time when it appeared clear to me that the use of alcohol and drugs was a daily event. And so there were obviously various times when I needed to communicate directly with Mr. Depp. And so some of my conversations with the people I've described involved finding good days and good parts of days when he and I could engage in conversations that he and I needed to engage in, where I knew he would be clear-minded and so forth.
Okay. So were there any periods that you can recall between 2010 and the end of your relationship with Mr. Depp that Mr. Depp had any periods of sobriety?
There were certainly stretches of time when he seemed better. There were days and weeks there were stretches of time when he was better, and I couldn't tell you dates, but there were stretches of time when he was better, and more often not.
As the business manager, you would have been responsible for paying Dr. Kipper's expenses. Is that correct?
Correct.
Can you recall approximately how much per year Mr. Depp spent on Dr. Kipper and his staff?
I think the fee was around $100,000 a month.
Describe for me what you observed of Mr. Depp engaging in what you would call erratic behavior.
What I mean are a variety of ways in which responses to things seem disproportionate to the things. And so, there were times when he would be upset about something, and he would be very, very, very upset about something, seemingly to me disproportionate to that something. Again, erratic is a funny word. I felt like things were less predictable. I felt like I was, I guess, professionally in a place where I never knew day to day what to expect.
You said that Mr. Depp was sometimes his responses seemed to be disproportionate and that he would be very, very upset. What, if any, observations did you make about Mr. Depp expressing anger?
When he was angry at someone, he would let them know. Was that sent in my direction? Very rarely, but at times, certainly on a handful of occasions in 2015. But if he was upset at a contractor, he would vent. If he was upset with a security person, he would vent. He would, he seemed to become increasingly less filtered and increasingly the notion of I want to answer you accurately. People moderate their behavior. They may moderate their behavior in public because things are, inappropriate in a particular setting. People may be upset with an employee, but they're constrained in how the employee is chastised. My experience was that Mr. Depp became increasingly less constrained, less concerned with whether he was going to upset someone's feelings, or just increasingly comfortable venting in an aggressive way when he was upset or disappointed about something.
And did that increase over time, beginning, I think you said around 2010?
It began to change in about 2010, and it increased over time, and increased to the point where our relationship began to be impacted in 2015 and was eventually obviously severed in 2016.
When Mr. Depp would express his anger and upset, did he use profanity?
Sure.
Did you observe any increase in Mr. Depp's expressions of anger and upset associated with any increase in financial difficulties or having to discuss financial difficulties?
Yes. His financial circumstances in 2015 had reached a point where I was extremely concerned and was on a very, very regular basis expressing that concern. And it seemed as I increased my level of expressing that concern, there was anger directed in my direction. And so my warnings in 2015 that we were in very dire financial circumstances were not met very favorably.
So did there come a time that you observed as Mr. Depp's business manager that his spending habits became more increased, perhaps excessive, extravagant?
Yes.
And when did you observe that? When did that begin? In the time frame I've described, in that 2010 and on time frame, as I recall, income was very significant, spending was very significant, and the spending levels had grown very, very, very large, and required that level of incredibly high income to be maintained. And when it dropped off, the disconnect became untenable. And what, if anything, did you say or do to try to assist Mr. Depp in curbing that spending?
Those conversations were constant.
And were Nathan Holmes, Kevin Murphy, and Stephen Duders part of the $300,000 a month full-time staff?
Yes.
Okay. Do you know roughly how much each of them were paid?
It's been a long time. If I had to guess, Kevin Murphy was probably paid about $250,000 a year, and Stephen and Nathan probably about $125,000 a year.
Do you know how much Jerry Judge was being paid by Mr. Depp as a security guard?
We paid Jerry by the day. I think Jerry made something like $10,000 a day.
Did Mr. Depp spend any money on charities?
Some, not very much.
And approximately how much?
No specific recollection.
Less than 50,000?
I don't recall writing large charity checks. It was more his style to show up at an event or sort of lend his name to something rather than write checks.
Mr. Mandel, did Mr. Depp ever acknowledge that he needed to change his spending patterns and improve the situation?
Yes. At various times when we would have these conversations, he would acknowledge that he understood what was being communicated and would make expressions of a commitment to sort of work with me to do what was necessary.
And were there occasions that Mr. Depp would apologize and say he was going to do better?
That happened on occasion, yes.
And what, if any, observations did you make about whether Mr. Depp ultimately did improve and work with you to try to get his spending under control?
That never seemed to happen. And so there would be, at times, expressions of appreciation, expressions of an understanding, expressions of a willingness to do what was necessary. But there never seemed to be any follow through when the things would be, teed up that had to happen to make those, words real. there was no follow-up.
Now, let's talk about the tax returns for a moment. Did you and TMG file tax returns on Mr. Depp and his company's behalves while you were his business manager?
Yes.
Are you aware that Mr. Depp testified under oath that you did not file his tax returns for 17 years?
I'm aware that you're telling me.
Is it true that you did not file his tax returns or those on behalf of his company for 17 years?
No, that's not true.
Were there times that you were unable to pay some or all of Mr. Depp's taxes on time? What is your understanding of what or his numerous other vices meant?
The use of alcohol and drugs.
Do you know how much Mr. Depp spent on prescription drugs during the time that you were his business manager?
There were periods of time when prescription spending was, from just my experience, very high, thousands of dollars a month, but I can't tell you the time periods.
Do you have a recollection of whether TMG had to pay for property damage at other rental properties or hotel properties that Mr. Depp used because of damage to the property?
Specifics, no, but did we pay damages at various times over the years? Absolutely, yes.
And do you recall that Mr. Depp from time to time did commit property damage in the rentals that he was in or hotels? And you recall that there were times you did have to pay for damage to Mr. Depp's rentals, is that correct, or hotels?
There were times.
Okay. Now, you had testified a little bit earlier about needing $25 million by the end of the year. Are you aware of whether Mr. Depp was able to sign on for any movies and obtain $25 million by the end of the year without the assistance of a lending entity? So the first time that you as the business manager were unable to pay Mr. Depp's taxes by October 15 was October 15, 2015. Is that correct?
Correct.
And you consider that to be an increasingly difficult and alarming situation that we were trying to resolve into late January 2016. Is that correct?
That's correct.
I showed you earlier exhibit number 8, which was the video clip of Mr. Depp slamming doors and pouring wine, etc., in the kitchen. Do you recall that video?
I recall the video, yes.
Okay. Do you have a recollection of giving Mr. Depp very bad news the morning of February 10, 2016?
I don't recall a specific meeting with a specific date. As I've indicated, there were a variety of meetings in groups and conversations alone and in groups regarding how these very dire financial circumstances were going to be addressed. And as I've indicated, the tone of these conversations became more tense as time went on, and these issues were not being addressed.
And is it fair to say in the first half of February of 2016, the conversations that you have just described were taking place?
Probably even more specifically, Mr. Depp and I began having conversations that took on a more heated turn in July of 15, when it became clear that he was not willing to sell the property in the south of France. And the tone of those conversations became more heated and more contentious as time went on because the circumstances were more dire.
And would it be fair to say that your perception was that the circumstances continued to become more dire between July 2015 up through the time of your termination in March 2016?
They did.
How did you learn of TMG's termination?
Edward White had a colleague, an employee, a CPA, someone in his office came to our office physically and hand delivered a letter.
And who was the letter from?
I think they hand delivered like one letter on the 15th and one on the 16th. So there was a letter signed by Mr. Depp indicating that our services had been terminated. And then there was a letter from Edward White's office, I recall, saying that they were the new people and we should coordinate a transition.
Did you have any familiarity with Edward White as of the time of the termination?
I had not heard of him.
And did Mr. White accept your offers of assistance?
For the most part, no.
Now, approximately how much did Mr. Depp earn during the period of time you represented him?
I recall the amount being reported to be something like $600 million, and believe that amount was probably, close to that.
Did you steal $650 million from Mr. Depp?
No,
Did you steal anything from Mr. Depp?
no,
Mr. Mandel, did TMG or you take any money other than the fees that you were entitled to from Mr. Depp?
no,
Mr. Mandel, were you ever found adjudicated by any court, any kind of legal entity, any agency to have committed malpractice, malfeasance, or embezzlement?
no.
All right, well, we'll go ahead and take our morning recess at this point. All right, ladies and gentlemen, let's take our morning recess. Do not discuss the case and don't do any outside research, okay? Thank you.